up, all of you wonderful people? All right, so this one is going to be a bit shorter. Me and the other bio teachers were talking, and the reason why um, it seems like we just sort of blew through cellular energetics is because it's crunch time, and we weren't able to dedicate as much time to this because of all of those fun little district tests that they kept pulling you guys out for. It really slowed us down. So these are the expectations to know from the cellular energetics unit. What we mean by cellular energetics is pretty much photosynthesis, cellular respiration, uh, anaerobic and aerobic respiration, and the role of ATP, also known as adenosine triphosphate. So you guys have heard about photosynthesis ever since you were in elementary school. Plants take in the sunlight, they make energy, they store that energy as simple sugars, so glucose. Cellular respiration, a lot of you, this is probably your initial exposure to this. It's how your cells make energy, get stuff done from those fuel sources. So we're going to go through it bit by bit. So let's start with students will understand the process of photosynthesis occurs mainly in the leaves of a plant and its chloroplasts. Okay. I also made these lovely little flashcards. So photosynthesis is happening in these chloroplasts. Now you don't need to know the intimate processes that make this happen. You just need to know that this is where it happens. You don't need to know all of these names. It may help you to understand that when you're looking at a structure like this is a chloroplast. It's a specialized organelle within a plant cell uh, that is the site of photosynthesis. So this is where in the plant it's absorbing that sunlight and using the energy from that to help make sugars. Now, you guys are going to hear in this unit specifically, and a lot in your chemistry classes and maybe in some college courses. So in chemical reactions, we have things called reactants and products. So you guys have probably heard of product before, it's something that you produce, something that's the end product. It's what we end up with. The reactants are the supplies we need to make that product. So for example, um, very poor metaphor, but if we're making a wooden chair, the wooden chair is our product. What do we need to make that wooden chair? We need nails, we need wood, we need a hammer. Okay, those are the reactants we need to put that chair together. Okay, so in photosynthesis, now you don't need to know these numbers, but you will be expected to know that photosynthesis requires water and carbon dioxide, and it gives out glucose and oxygen. And you guys already knew this, okay? You guys have been seeing that chart ever since you were in elementary school. Humans exhale CO2. A lot of other animals exhale CO2. Plants take in that CO2. And, you need to water your plants as well. So they take in carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, and it ends up making glucose and oxygen. All right. It's actually pretty self-explanatory as well, because if you look at what each are made of, so see how carbon dioxide, it's a carbon and two oxygens. See how water is two hydrogens and an oxygen. Now look at what sugar is. Sugar is just a 1-to-1 ratio of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So we get our carbon from our carbon dioxide, we get our hydrogen from our water, and we get some oxygen from both, and this ends up making our sugar. All right, and then we end up with extra oxygen left over, sort of a byproduct. So it's releasing this oxygen as a byproduct of the metabolism. It's trying to make sugar as that energy source. Pretty much every living thing needs sugar in some form for energy. Fun fact, your brain needs sugar just as much as it does oxygen. If your blood sugar falls to 50% its normal range, you will fall unconscious. Yeah, no, sugar is very much so a necessity for many living things, especially humans. Thankfully, for better or for worse, our modern diets, we are not usually wanting for sugar. We usually have that guy covered pretty well. So again, you need to know that for photosynthesis, the input is carbon dioxide and water. We get a little sunlight, and then our output is sugar and oxygen. All right. Uh, then this is just some extra stuff I threw in there for you guys to remember. Um, you guys are also expected to know just generally what cancer is, and I'm going to do that in a different video. It's going to be a really short one. But yeah, so that is photosynthesis. Cellular respiration is the opposite. Cellular respiration, you know how we need to breathe in oxygen? Okay, we need to breathe in oxygen. That oxygen is needed to break down the glucose. And then we end up exhaling carbon dioxide, and we also make a little bit of water as a byproduct of that as well. So cellular respiration, the process by which we make energy from the sugars that we have stored, that can happen in the presence of oxygen. So cellular respiration is the opposite of photosynthesis, okay? Take in oxygen, breaking down some sugars, making energy. Our cells let out some CO2 as a byproduct of that. That's actually how you end up exhaling carbon dioxide. Your cells in your body release CO2 as a byproduct of them making energy. It's carried through your bloodstream. And when your blood arrives in your lungs, to refuel on oxygen to carry to your cells, it's releasing that carbon dioxide. So that's why we exhale that CO2, because our blood is carrying that CO2 to our lungs to be dispelled when we exhale, and then picking up that oxygen so we can deliver oxygen to our cells. It's all a very neato burrito process. So you've got these two down. Uh, Autotrophs, it's just a fancy word for producer. Autotroph means that it makes its own food. So, for example, we humans, we are not able, I'm not talking about going into the kitchen and making a sandwich. That's not making your own food in this sense. We're talking about autotrophs and heterotrophs. An autotroph is like a plant. It just needs some sunlight and some water, and it's good. It can make its own energy. It needs sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, and it's a happy camper. It can do what it needs to. Us, we need to eat something else in order to survive. All right? We cannot just sit out in the sunlight, drink some water, take in some CO2 and call it a day. No, we need to roll down the Burger King, wait a half hour for a crappy double bacon cheeseburger that felt like it had been sitting on the counter for hours, and nobody seems to be in any rush to get you your food in time, and you're just sitting there wondering, I should really be on a diet, but that's enough about, just hypothetical situations. Anyway, uh, autotrophs and heterotrophs perform cellular respiration reactions in the mitochondria that break down potential. Yep. So this is pretty much just explains it for you. There's really nothing more to it than you need to know that both autotrophs and heterotrophs perform cellular respiration. Okay. Even though plants do photosynthesis, they also need to do something with that energy that they're storing. So just remember this, plants do photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Heterotrophs, so consumers, they just do cellular respiration. And the end goal of all of this is to make adenosine triphosphate. That is what every living thing needs to get anything done. It's the energy currency of every living thing. All right. And They want you to understand that photosynthesis and cellular respiration are basically inverse processes. What I mean by inverse is they're reverse or they're opposite. So while photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide and water to get you sugar, oxygen, cellular respiration is the opposite of that. All right. The breakdown of glucose in the presence of oxygen, making a byproduct of CO2 and some water. Okay. So photosynthesis stores energy. Cellular respiration releases that energy. All right. And now we're going to talk about anaerobic and aerobic respiration. I found a very useful chart for you guys. So here we go. So what aerobic, you guys might have heard the phrase aerobic exercise. Aerobic just means in the presence of air. So aerobic respiration is when we are generating energy in the presence of oxygen. Okay, energy is released from the complete breakdown of glucose. So in aerobic respiration, we break down glucose in the presence of oxygen, and we end up with energy, carbon dioxide, and water. So standard cellular respiration. It is the most efficient form of respiration, and it produces carbon dioxide and water. Now, anaerobic respiration, this is actually part of the reason why exercising and working out sucks so much, because we actually, our body under intense physical stress cannot keep up with the oxygen demands. So we're basically, we're we're sort of like borrowing. We're putting out more than we can feasibly take in. If we were only able to move only in the presence of an adequate oxygen supply, we would not be able to go on for as long as we do. So our body is able to do what's called anaerobic respiration, so creating energy without oxygen. Energy is released from the incomplete breakdown of glucose. So just glucose, and we end up with energy and lactic acid. It is not as efficient. And this is actually why your muscles get tired and fatigued, because one of the byproducts is lactic acid. It's kind of the body's way of letting you know, hey man, we're kind of don't have the means to keep up with what you're doing right now. So can you just kind of not? So that's a lot of the reason why you get sore. It's that lactic acid buildup. So that's pretty much aerobic and anaerobic respiration. And we were talking briefly about adenosine triphosphate before. It is used to release energy, and the way it releases energy, so that triphosphate sentence right there, it's very critical, because the reason that it releases energy is it's got these three phosphate groups in it. This bond right here, think of like holding two oppositely, or not oppositely charged, two of the same charge magnets together. They both have a negative magnetic component. There's a lot of force if you try to shove them together, right? It's kind of similar to what's happening in these phosphate bonds. They're forced together, so it's very high, it's very tense. So when they break, it releases energy. So that's how energy is released. This phosphate, this third one, breaks off, and that's how the energy is released. Okay. So in adenosine triphosphate, these three phosphates, this third one breaks off, energy is released. All right. So that is pretty much the entirety of the energetics unit. It's pretty simple. You just need to pretty much, it's just photosynthesis, cellular respiration, anaerobic and aerobic respiration. If you understand those four concepts decently enough, you'll be fine for this portion. I don't think they're going to get too much into this. I guarantee there's going to be at least two questions on it, though. Excuse me. All right, so that's it for energetics. I think the only things left after this for your first semester exam are the molecular genetics, as well as the Mendelian and non-Mendelian genetics. So I'm going to try to get those done before the end of the day. So have fun. Do your best. Don't stress out. Take it easy.